The Arcane River. Author's note. From here on out, the story presentation of the game shifts from a series of parallel stories into a singular journey made by the adversary. I have some very strong thoughts about the adversary storyline, so apologies in advance for what's inevitably gonna be a long, drawn out rant. If you just want the stuff that's actually relevant to the story, feel free to skip to the last paragraph of this author's note. I think that the adversary storyline is the stupidest thing that Nexon has ever come up with in its long history of stupid decisions. When I say the adversary storyline, I don't mean the concept of the adversary as it exists in the lore. My issue is the way in which the writers have chosen to present the adversary as the singular protagonist of the entire overarching story. The adversary and their journey through the Arcane River is the culmination of nearly 2 decades worth of story build-up. We've followed the journeys of dozens of characters, each of them having their own personal struggles, characterizations, and motivations. And this fight with the Black Mage was supposed to be the final crucible through which all of these characters are meant to be pushed to their limits. The entire point of the Alliance's siege on the Black Mage was that they've mobilized every single asset and every single hero that they've ever gathered in order to have them work together to save the world. The adversary storyline summarily, I guess that's how it's pronounced, killed any chance of giving a proper conclusion to these characters by creating a generic template of a protagonist, effectively sweeping the personal journeys of every single class under the rug, as though none of it mattered. Not only that, but every class is now subjected to the same canned dialogue that doesn't even fit the personality of a vast majority of the classes. We've got characters like Kane talking like they're 12 years old, saying things like, "Hi, Mr. Fishy," and completely killing any sense of immersion that might have existed. My biggest question to Nexon is this. What exactly is the point of classes even existing as characters if you're just going to act like every class except the ones that we're playing are just as well that we're playing as just as well might not even exist? If I decide to make an Evan, for example, I sure as hell expect to keep playing as an Evan throughout the game, not have him be spiritually killed off and overwritten by someone who functionally has no backstory, no personality, and no proactiveness to do anything beyond what he's been told. To an extent, this is a problem even in class stories, but at least in those class stories, it feels like we're playing as an actual person. Here, our character is so vacant and unresponsive that it feels like we exist solely to be talked at by other characters and react to their instructions by killing things, with no semblance of having any thoughts or opinions of our own. If my hypothetical Evan goes to Celis, he'll just sit there and vacantly listen to Ollie talk about how she has to overcome people's low opinions of her through hard work and perseverance, because at no point did the writers think it appropriate to have him actually bond with her in any meaningful way through his own experiences with the heroes thinking him to be unworthy of succeeding Frood. A good 70% of the adversary storyline is exactly like this, with the other 30% admittedly being a decent character arc for the generic protagonist that we're now playing as for the rest of our lives. On top of that, unlike what we occasionally get in class storylines, the adversary goes through their journey without interacting with a single class in the game. In fact, other classes don't even exist as far as the adversary's narrative is concerned. My hypothetical Evan defeated the Black Mage all on his own, and every other class in the game just sat there twiddling their thumbs on the sidelines. Or at least, that's what I'm assuming, since we don't ever get told what all these other people got to make any meaningful contributions in the most important fight of their lives. If only one character can be the adversary, then at that point, why not just pick and choose two other classes to accompany us as NPCs? Evan could have gone through the Arcane River journey alongside Kaiser and Ilium, since all three of them are supposed to be Chosen One type leaders, inheriting a great legacy. Luminous, Arc could be grouped together because they both have corrupting forces that they're fighting to keep under control. All these different class pairings could have let our characters actually feel like organic people, not to mention that their dynamics and backgrounds can play off one another for character development and world building. You don't even need to have these groupings to be consistent either. If Evan gets Kaiser and Ilium, then Ilium could get the Explorer in his own team for when he's the player. The writers already made it so that there's no true canonical adversary, anyways. That means there's no need to maintain canonical groupings either. That way, they wouldn't need to be locked into only grouping certain characters with other characters, allowing for a variety of permutations for a particular character, as well as ensuring that new classes can still get paired with older classes. It'd be more work to do something like this, but if this is the culmination of close to 20 years worth of so many other people's time and effort in laying the groundwork of this conclusion, I think it's only fair and respectful to them that the current writers honor the work that was put in by taking ownership of the story and giving at least some sort of proper conclusion instead of taking the easiest possible way out. Writing scripts for different group pairings might be a bit of an ask, but making unique scripts for individual classes definitely isn't. And if they still can't do that, the barest minimum is at least write out 3 or 4 different generic scripts for the classes with overlapping personalities so that edgy classes will at least stop acting so out of character with peppy and positive dialogue. Instead, they opted to make a generic protagonist, and their terrible solution to sprinkle in traces of individuality is by adding exclusive dialogue. When classes get exclusive dialogue in the adversary storyline, it's like they suddenly switch back into themselves for a couple of sentences, and then abruptly switch back to the adversary script like they're two completely different people. Because for all intents and purposes, they practically are two different people. My other main problem with exclusive dialogue is how inaccessible they've made it, despite the fact that it often holds very important bits of lore. For example, they revealed that Havoc, Darmor's Apostle of Lightning, is a pureblood demon in a single line that only the demon gets in Burning Cernium. Similarly, Laura gets almost the entire plot of Odium revealed to her in her exclusive dialogue in Burning Cernium too. For people who enjoy the story, speculation is pretty damn important when the game releases updates so sparsely. Being a fan of MapleStory's story is literally like having a TV show that releases an hour-long episode twice in a whole year. It's not like they went it's not like they won't eventually reveal this information once it becomes relevant, but given how slowly Nexon puts out its story content, we'd be lucky if half of the story threads introduced get resolved or even acknowledged 10 years from now. It's really because of that, more than anything else, that it seems ridiculous to me that they gatekeep lore by expecting us to get several dozen classes to level 260 plus for small breadcrumbs. It makes me even more frustrated that they act like they can just pass up the job of sharing lore to the community when so many high level players just hold spacebar, which only makes it a dozen times more difficult for people interested in the story to even access the regular story, let alone all the exclusive dialogue. That's primarily the reason why I created this site to begin with, and why I'm so committed to maintaining it. It's with as much detail as possible, as I want the complete story, or at least as much as I can get my hands on, exclusive dialogue and all, to be available to everyone so that they don't have to scour the depths of the internet for it like I did. I'll still give some credit to Nexon here though. Their improvements on story replay has made it a lot easier to go back and access exclusive dialogue, especially since you can access the highest level content that you've unlocked with any class, not just the ones that you've played it on. They're slowly letting us replay class stories as they implement it, but I do wish that they'd let us replay theme dungeons too, since there's exclusive dialogue in some of them as well. And now that I've gotten that out of my system, back to the main point. I'm starting this section out with the Amnesiac Temple Keeper storyline. While it can be done much earlier, I'm placing it here because the adversary needs to be the one who completes this quest. Also, even though we don't realize that we're the adversary until Asphera, I'll continue referring to us as such in order to distinguish us as the specific protagonist of these events. While exploring the Temple of Time, the adversary encountered a temple keeper who asked them for help as they had gotten lost. Author's note: They use male pronouns for Cow in the Amnesiac Temple Keeper storyline, but they use gender neutral pronouns during the events in Vanishing Journey. Since Cow's gender is the same as the player's gender, I'll continue to use gender neutral pronouns to refer to them both. So apologies in advance if this starts to sound confusing. The adversary gave them directions to 3 doors, and soon encountered them standing near the head temple keeper when they returned. The head temple keeper thanked the adversary for helping the amnesiac temple keeper. The adversary asked him whether the amnesiac temple keeper was new, to which the head temple keeper explained that the amnesiac temple keeper kept getting lost in the temple while trying to find their old memories. He told them that the temple keeper had found them in the gate of the past with their memories missing and had decided to take them in. The adversary then agreed to help get the amnesiac temple keeper's memories back. The temple keeper sent the adversary to the memory keeper, who explained that the memories which the amnesiac temple keeper had lost were the innocent childhood memories that defined who they were, and that the amnesiac temple keeper would need to retrieve those memories on their own in order to get the rest of their memories back. The adversary returned back to the amnesiac temple keeper and told them that the memory keeper had said. After realizing that they would need to find the memories on their own, the amnesiac temple keeper dejectedly thanked them. Just as the adversary was about to leave, the temple keeper pulled them aside and told them that he had a plan to help the amnesiac temple keeper, or had a plan to help get the amnesiac temple keeper's memories back. He asked them to visit the sorcerer, a greedy man who was adept at making potions. The sorcerer offered to sell them Tinglebrain Potion, which he believed could help the amnesiac temple keeper get their memories back. The adversary brought him shards of recollection and pieces of memory and paid a fee in exchange for him to brew the potion. They brought the potion to the amnesiac temple keeper, who eagerly drank it, though they were disappointed that they were unable to recall anything more. Author's note: before the Ellen Forest revamp, Cow used to recall their time in Ellen Forest, although all references to Cow existing in Ellen Forest have now been removed. Originally, Cow recalled a dark forest, tents, fairies with beautiful wings, and someone with glasses scolding them. The person scolding them was actually Loha, who also scolded the player for being lazy during the original Ellen Forest storyline after mistaking them for Cow. Frustrated, the temple keeper asked the adversary to see the record keeper, who had recorded all events of the past. The record keeper explained that he had been awaiting their arrival, but he added that he couldn't help. He told them to return to the temple keeper and to tell him precisely that the amnesiac temple keeper hadn't lost their time. The adversary told the temple keeper what the record keeper had said, but the temple keeper was confused by the record keeper's words and decided to give up. The adversary asked him what the record keeper had meant, to which the temple keeper replied that he wasn't sure, though he wondered whether it might mean that the amnesiac temple keeper had actually come through the gate of the past, rather than merely being a vagrant who had been found wandering in the halls. As the adversary approached the amnesiac temple keeper to tell them about their failure, the amnesiac temple keeper excitedly told them that they had now remembered their name, Cow, which had been given to them by the Guardians of Time. They then removed their hood and, to the adversary's shock, revealed that they had the exact same face. Author's note: Cal's backstory was reorganized during the Ellen Forest revamp, and it was explained that the Black Mage sent Cal back in time after they failed to defeat him. This caused Cal to emerge from the gate of the past, but forcing one's way through the gate without permission causes them to lose their memories. Cal was eventually found by the Temple Keepers, who named them Cow, which means chaos, in order to represent the undefinable meaning of time. The line that Cow has about their name being given to them by the Guardians of Time was added in the revamp, which also retroactively renamed all the Temple Keepers in the Arcane River to the Guardians of Time, possibly to make it more consistent with Arcarium being described as a Guardian of Time. Before the revamp, it was suggested that the player's canonical name is Cow, but the revamp confirms that Cow's real name is still the player's name. For a complete timeline of Cow's journey, see the notes at the end of the Limina section. Sometime later, the adversary was contacted by the Memory Keeper, who told them that those who served the Temple of Time had figured out a way to transcend one's limitations, and he invited him to see, or they invited them to see him in order to learn how. After they arrived, he asked them whether they were aware of the erda flow, the energy that made up the world. After the adversary voiced their confusion, the Memory Keeper explained that erdas were the basic building blocks of reality, constantly undergoing a cycle of creation and destruction. However, he told them that the erdas had lately been disappearing from the world. He then taught them how to perceive erdas, allowing their consciousness to meld with that of the erda flow. Suddenly, the adversary heard the voice of the erdas, who explained that they had once flowed through the world tree in their cycle of creation and destruction until her life force had been scattered across Maple World. With her disappearance, the Black Mage had been able to steal the erdas from their natural flow, pulling them into the gate of the present. They suspected that the Black Mage wanted to use the erdas to create a new world, though they warned that it would mean that Maple World would be destroyed in the process. Author's note: this is a pretty major inconsistency in the writing of the Arcane River storyline, as the knowledge that the Black Mage was planning to create a new world was meant to be a secret until Asphera. Although the Arcane River was marketed as the final chapter of the Black Mage arc, it's pretty clear that there was no overarching plan for its writing, as seen in how pointless 2/3 of the whole thing was. Moras and Esfero were really the only areas with any actual substance to their story, and I'm pretty sure that they were also written alongside Tenebris by a different writer, which explains why it seems like the knowledge about the Black Mage's plan to recreate the world was retroactively treated like some sort of secret revelation, since I doubt that the new writer who took over would have paid attention to a 10-second conversation in a job advancement quest line. In order to accept their power, the Erda told the adversary to seek out the three goddesses. After returning back to the Temple of Time, the adversary told the Memory Keeper that they had spoken to the Erdas. The Memory Keeper was surprised to learn this, as he had never been able to communicate with the Erda in all the time that he had observed them. He realized that the adversary had a greater fate than he had initially suspected, and believed that the Erdas wished to bestow their power upon them. As the goddesses acted as the conduits between the Erdas and the people of their respective worlds, he explained that they would be able to help. He then told them that according to legend, the goddesses had used the Erdas in the darkness of the beginning to sculpt a soul, and that it was said that their ability to manipulate the Erdas could be passed down. Author's note: before the Destiny update, the Memory Keepers actually explained that after the fall of the ancient gods, the goddesses had used the Erdas to sculpt the three worlds, and that though a select few humans, elves, demons, and dragons, and taught a select few how to use the Erda as well. The writers likely removed the part about the different races in order to avoid restricting themselves, since the flora and anima are also major races that weren't mentioned. The part about the goddesses creating the three worlds has always been a plot hole, because every other storyline in the game states that the overseers were responsible for separating the three pre existing worlds into their own separate dimensions. Worlds like Grandis were said to have existed during the time of the ancient gods, and so it would be impossible for the goddesses to have created them after the ancient gods' fall. I have no idea what they mean by sculpting a soul, but I'm assuming that it's meant to be a plot point in the future. In order to speak with the goddesses, the adversary first went to the Bowman Instructional School, where they found a horizon portal that sent them to the goddess of the Maple World in the Erda flow. The goddess told them that few had come this far and explained that if they learned to control the Erdas within themselves, they would unlock a new power. Before she aided them, however, the goddess asked what it was that they cherished most in the world. Author's note: each class gets two options to choose between, although neither affect the overall story. Explorers get to choose between their friends or the people of Maple World. Cannoneer gets to choose between Monkey or his fellow adventurers. Before the Destiny update, he originally got to choose between Monkey or his true love, whoever they ended up being. I think that the reason that this got changed is because the writers wanted to standardize the choices for all special explorers to be between something unique for their story and their friends. Both before and after Destiny, Monkey will point to himself when Cannoneer is choosing. Before Destiny, he either shrieks happily or angrily, depending on whether Cannoneer chooses him or not. After Destiny, even if Cannoneer chooses his fellow adventurers, he still includes Monkey as part of that list, and so Monkey will shriek happily in either case. Jewelblade gets to choose between the Secret Garden, where he first learned the art of the sword, or his friends, whom he's journeyed with. Pathfinder gets to choose between the promise that she made with Athena Pierce to explore undiscovered places, or the new friends that she met while exploring. Cygnus Knights get to choose between Empress Cygnus or the Chief Knight who trained them. Mihail gets to choose between Empress Cygnus or his fellow Chief Knights. The main Resistance classes get to choose between Edelstein and the Resistance, or the promise that they made to Vita to make a better world. Xenon gets to choose between Edelstein and the Resistance, or his old friends from his hazy memories. The demon gets to choose between his old family home, the place where he made his only happy memories of the Maple World, or Mastema. Mastema gets very flustered if you choose her. Aran gets to choose between the other heroes, or Lilin. Evan gets to choose between the people of Hennesis, or Myrrh. He's also the only member of the heroes who doesn't get the option to pick the other heroes, probably because he's barely interacted with them outside of the heroes of Maple Blockbuster. Mercedes gets to choose between the other heroes, or LOL and the elves. Phantom gets to choose between the other heroes, or Empress Cygnus. His reasoning for Empress Cygnus is the most important thing to him. Oh, his reasoning for Cygnus is that the most important thing to him is preserving the Empress's bloodline, and with Arya gone, Cygnus is the only one left to carry it on, for which he vows that he'll do everything to help her. Luminous gets to choose between the other heroes or Lania. Shade gets to choose between the other heroes or Moonbeam. Kaiser gets to choose between Tyr and those who he protects as Kaiser. Angelic Buster gets to choose between Kyle or everyone whom she helps as Angelic Buster. After the player makes their choice and finishes explaining their reasoning to the goddesses, Escalade will interrupt and ask if he is one of the choices. Angelic Buster will reassure him that he's precious to her, although she'll think to herself that she completely forgot about him, which she absolutely deserves. Cadetta gets to choose between her old memories of her castle and her family, or her fellow shadow dealers. Kane gets to choose between his childhood memories of Leska or his new memories made from adventuring. For the second choice, he explains that the more that he tried recalling his past memories, the more pain and malice came with them. However, after leaving Tulin City, he made new friends, and all of his memories of his time in Maple World are happy, and so he wants to protect the world in order to ensure that those memories won't turn into regret or loss like his old ones. Ilium gets to choose between Morian, X, and Machina, or the people of the Maple World. Despite only naming those three people for his first choice, his dialogue, if you pick that option, has him also mention Dean, Carnelian, and Scenaria. Ark gets to choose between his new friends or his promise to an old one that ended in tragedy in the world. For the second option, he tells the goddess that even though Albert may have given up hope, he vows that he won't, and that before they meet again, he'll prove that determination can make all the difference when it comes to protecting the ones that he cares for. They're hyping up Ark and Albert's reunion so much that I can already guarantee that it's going to be absolutely devastating for my fragile psyche. Adele gets to choose between her promise to Jerome or her commitment to chivalry. For the second choice, Adele tells the goddess that as a knight, she won't abide corruption and wrongdoing before her, and that nothing can justify sacrificing innocence for one's ambitions. Didn't really seem to matter for her a few sections ago when she celebrated defending a man who was literally ready to do anything, or literally ready to do exactly that, but go off, I guess. Then again, Darmor also organized a coup to kill his own father because he was about to wipe out all life, and then Darmor goes on and does the exact same thing. And Veronica and the other knights of the Einherjar also seem to be totally chill with Darmor's war, but not his father's, so maybe hypocrisy is just a high flora tradition. Kali gets to choose between her family or the people that she meets in her adventures. For her family, she explains that she had thought that she had lost everything when Rasha and her father were killed, leaving her only with fierce vengeance. However, she tells the goddess that vengeance wasn't the only mission left to her, as she also wants to ensure that what had happened to Rasha wouldn't happen ever again. She adds that she doesn't want anyone to feel the guilt that she had when she had run away at the expense of leaving her father behind to be killed. Ho-young gets to choose between dreaming of the blue sky or the bond of the outside world. The description for both is a bit vague, but the first option is basically his dream to become a sage and surpass even Tai Yu, while the second option is basically all the things outside the hermitage that he's come to love, like food, people, etc. Laura gets to choose between her calling to ring the bell or helping all the people that she meets. Zero gets to choose between Alpha/Beta or their priests who have helped them at the temple. Kinesis gets to choose between Yuna and Jay or himself. Even even the goddess is shook if you choose the second option, and she asks about his reasoning. Kinesis tells the goddess that he's learned that he can't protect others if he can't protect himself. Kinesis is an absolute legend for deviating from the usual protagonist script. After hearing their response, the goddess gives them the arcane stone of Mapleworld, which she explained would help them gather the ambient erda within their own body once the stone was awakened. Author's note: this next portion takes place only if you are an explorer. I personally view it as additional proof that the explorer really is intended to be the canonical adversary. Before leaving, the explorer asks the goddess why she can't come back as sugar anymore. The goddess explained that she would answer their question by explaining why she had appeared as sugar in the first place. She told the explorer that it was the duty of the goddess to protect their worlds, and that she had been waiting for someone with the power to sense the gate of darkness and to rid Mapleworld of it once and for all. Author's note: the gate of darkness is likely her referring to the gate of the presence, or of the present, behind which the Black Mage was sealed. The explorer was surprised to learn that they were the one whom she had been waiting for, to which the goddess told them that she had come to witness the goodness not only of their heart, but the hearts of multitudes from around the world joined together for the sake of the world that they loved. She explained that mortals didn't need someone to intervene for them, as they always had the power to save themselves, and that she merely helped them where she could. She then asked the explorer not to forget the goodness that lived within before sending them on their way. After speaking with the goddess of Mapleworld, the explorer heard the mysterious voice calling out to them. The voice explained that the explorer was the incarnation of his will, just as they were representative of his will, adding that it would be their final meeting, as the explorer had awakened their full potential. The voice explained that he was a man who had given his heart to calm the chaos of his time, just as the goddesses had willed it. He then wondered aloud whether history remembered him. The explorer asked the voice whether he was the legendary first explorer, to which the first explorer expressed his surprise that the people of the present saw him as a legend, as he had been born merely as an ordinary human child. Though he had been an orphan, he had never been alone, as Sugar had always been beside him. He explained that eventually he had realized who she really was, but no matter how much they had enjoyed spending time together, she had always seemed sad, as though she were consumed by guilt. Eventually, he had realized that she had created him to save the world, and that she would have to watch him die in order to do so. A cruel fate that the goddess herself had laid out for him. Author's note: the GMS translation team has been doing a pretty bad job ever since the Destiny update, Whereas the KMS text has the first explorer talk about the cruel fate that the goddess had laid out for him, the GMS text merely says that they were both intertwined in their tragic fate. The GMS dialogue fails to properly capture the nuance of what the first explorer is saying, as the original text suggests that he blames Sugar on some level for his destiny. The Shangri-La storyline expands on the first explorer's words, as it reveals that the fate of every adversary is to die after fulfilling their purpose by killing a god. It explains that the overseers had believed that the adversaries, beings who had held unchecked and immense powers to influence the shape of destiny, were a threat to order itself, as unleashing such powerful, uncontrollable beings into the world and allowing them to live after fulfilling their mission would plunge the universe into a second age of chaos, as though the ancient gods had never left. In order to circumvent this, the overseers ordained that the adversaries would meet their end after they fulfilled their purposes, ensuring that they would not be allowed to keep living after they were of no further use to the overseers. This is the same reason why Darmor shattered our sealstone in Cernium, as we would have died if it had remained inside our body any longer. Although I'm personally extremely dubious of this explanation for reasons that I'll get into in a later section. In regards to the first explorer, Sugar had deliberately led him into fusing with a god sphere, knowing full well that he would be killed after his purpose was fulfilled. The fact that he seems to blame Sugar in the original KMS text makes me think that he likely felt betrayed by her, since she probably glossed over the fact that choosing to fuse with the God Sphere would result in his premature death. Personally, I like to think that the problem wasn't that he would be killed, since he was a hero who would have made the choice anyways, but rather it was the fact that Sugar felt like she needed to lie to him in the first place and took away his right to choose his destiny for himself. Given how close they both were, I can definitely see how the first explorer might have taken the fact that even after knowing him so well, Sugar couldn't even trust him to make the right choice on his own without sugarcoating, no pun intended, what would happen to him. However, this is all assuming that she didn't tell him the truth until after the fact. It's also very possible that she didn't tell him until right before he became an adversary, which is still technically lying, although it's more understandable why she wouldn't have told him before that. Somehow, I doubt that coming up as an orphan and asking I doubt that coming up to an orphan and asking them to die for the world in your very first meeting is going to go the way you want it to. There are a lot more questions to be asked about the whole thing, like where Sugar even got the God Sphere from, when the God Spheres and the adversaries themselves were all created by the Elders in Odium. Whether the first explorer was created outside of Odium, whether he was able to retain his humanity and sense of self, and whether he was the only adversary that fought in Maple World. But those are questions that Nexon probably won't be answering for a couple more years. On another note, I've said in the past that the goddesses are more like the spirit manifestations of their world, but I actually wonder whether they're like the interfaces between the overseers and the mortals. The overseers are abstract, formless beings who have been shown to look like giant nebuluses in space, or giant nebulas in space. And so it would make sense that the overseers, also described as the will of the world, would use the goddesses, described as the spirits of their world, as mouthpieces to make their own will known to humanity. At the same time, the fact that the goddesses seem to have some capacity to directly interfere with the world, such as the goddess of Maple World manifesting as Sugar, likely means that the goddesses are also their own beings with their own free will. If the goddesses are the interface between the overseers and the mortals, then the transcendents would be able to interface between the overseers and the physical plane. Since the Transcendents were the only things created by the Overseers, there's also they are also the only beings that the Overseers can completely control like puppets, whereas they can't directly override the free will of mortals, for which their only option is to ask nicely through the goddesses in order to convince mortals to do what they want, like how sugar aids the first explorer and the explorer, and how the overseers were said to somehow bless the elders of Grandis and ask them to conduct their experiments in odium, which I'd suspect is through the goddess of Grandis. The explorer asked about their powers, which the first explorer explained that the power within them was a portion of his own power, which had been granted to him by the ones who kept order. Regarding their fate, the first explorer told them that they were the one who had inherited his fate and asked that their good will be a torch to lead the way. Author's note: in the GMS dialogue, the first explorer will instead tell us that our powers flow from him, just as it flows to those who desire a safe, stable world and have the heart to bring it about. I have absolutely no idea why this was changed because the ones who keep order is a reference to the overseers, whose power dwells within the seal stones. You'll see in the future sections that GMS has some stupid obsession with omitting important parts of lore in their translations. When the explorer asked if their fate was to defeat the Black Mage, he told them that if the chaos of their time had begun with him, then it was. However, he told them that how their fate transpired depended on them, for while his will was their will, his choices were not theirs. Having answered all their questions, the first explorer told them to walk the fated path with awakened power, as the chaos that had long since faded away was gathering again. Author's note: from here on, the story returns to being class agnostic. Next, the adversary traveled to Pantheon and used the Horizon portal inside the Great Temple to meet the goddess of Grandis. Author's note: her form varies depending on your class. For all non Grandis classes and Nova classes, she appears as an ancient Nova, which is more dragon like, similar to how Escalade appears. For Anima classes, she appears as a rabbit anima. For Flora classes, she appears as a verdant Flora, although her blue wings are natural, not mechanical. Each of the Grandis classes also gets some exclusive dialogue with the goddess of Grandis. For Kaiser, the goddess greets him and asks if he has come to raise his power to the next level. For Angelic Buster, the goddess explains that she's been watching her progress intently and notes that she's done well to protect and grow her power. For Cadena, the goddess greets her and notes that though Cadena was born to royalty, she's chosen a darker path, adding that she knows that Cadena would come to her seeking more power. For Cain, the goddess greets him and notes that he's survived his tribulations and has emerged from the darkness. For Ilium, the goddess greets him and asks if he's come to unlock more of his mitocrystal's power. For Adele, the goddess greets her and notes that she's overcome her hardships and has discovered a new calling. For Ark, the goddess notes that his determination is strong, even in the faces of chaos. For Kali, the goddess greets her as the one who has overcome her vengeance in the tragedy of the desert. For Ho Young, the goddess greets him and explains that she's been monitoring his performance for some time. She notes that it seems that he and Tauti have developed what she can only assume to be some tentative form of a friendship. For Laura, the goddess notes that she's the one who will wash away the wrongs of the sinners and bring unending goodness. The goddess greeted the adversary and asked them to prove their strength by defeating Magnus. She sent them to an illusion of the Tyrant Castle, in which the adversary successfully bested the conjured Magnus before returning back to her. Impressed by their strength, the goddess gave them the arcane stone of Grandis. Finally, the adversary returned back to Maple World and went to the base of the Dark World Tree, where the remnants of Damien's army, who had accepted defeat, fought against the rest of their comrades, who had become possessed by the vestiges of the Spirit of Vengeance. They took the Horizon portal at the deserted camp and found the goddess of Tynerum, who told them that if Maple World was a world of rulers and order, then Tynerum was a world of chaos and uncertainty. She explained that demons had played as shadows did in Candlelight for a very long time. Author's note: The demons get some exclusive dialogue in which she notes that he should know what she's talking about well, since he's a demon himself. She added that though she had no interest in the affairs of Mapleworld, the balance between the worlds had to be maintained by defeating the Black Mage. She then tested them by sending them to the Dark World Tree and having them defeat the demon soldiers that she summoned. After defeating the corrupted demon soldiers, the adversary returned to the goddess, who gave them the arcane stone of Tynerum. Author's note: originally, she used to kick you out and move the Horizon portal to one of the top 3 branches of the Dark World tree, after which you had to find her within 5 minutes. Literally everyone hated this because many classes simply couldn't survive with the level 220 mobs and the anti-AFK mob that locked your potion uses. Thankfully, it was changed with the Destiny update. The adversary then returned to the Memory Keeper, who activated the arcane stone and used them to awaken a new power within the adversary. The Memory Keeper then asked the adversary if they remembered Cow, the amnesiac temple keeper. He explained that the priests of the Temple of Time had entered the gate of the present in order to explore the Arcane River, a river created from pure erdas, and that Cow had gone with them in search of their memories. Because of the purity of the erdas, he told the adversaries that only those who possessed arcane power could fight the erda monsters. When the adversary expressed their confusion, the Memory Keeper told them to see for themselves and instructed them to fight the happy erdas. Author's note: yeah, no, I'm good. I'd rather throw myself off a building. There's a whole damn timeline where us not having arcane power led to the world being destroyed, and yet this Temple of Time employee, whose literal job is to observe those exact moments in time, is really gonna do me like this. Where's the option to say, nah, I believe you, and he gives me the stupid symbol without requiring my squishy mules to die before we've even taken one step towards the Black Mage? It gets to the point that random strangers will offer to carry me because the sight of me charging in and dying for the 17th time in a row, like I'm a level 10 noob stuck in Orbis, is too pathetic for anyone with dignity to watch. The adversary found that the Happy Erdas were extremely difficult to fight and returned to the Memory Keeper, who explained that the reason why they were struggling to face the Erdas was because the power of the body and the power of the soul were different. He told the adversary that only by tapping into the Erda flow could they wield the arcane power to face high purity Erda monsters. He explained that by forcing the erda within themselves into an arcane symbol, they would be able to use the symbol as a protective mark, which would allow them to call upon the arcane power within the erda flow without their energy being sapped away upon contact. He gave the adversary a basic arcane symbol and explained that strengthening it would allow them to wield more arcane power and deal more damage to the monsters of the Arcane River.